When did you first start hearing the stories about your father, and how long of a process was this to getting to this moment?
Well, look how old I look. That's how long. Well, as you can see, I lived it. I'm the older of the two brothers, but I was actually 5 when it happened. We just cast the kids a little older so we didn't have little babies on the set. So I lived that, and I was very aware of that because my dad was leaving and my mother was upset. And then my father, right after Christmas, brought me up to Dr. Shirley's loft above Carnegie Hall, and it was like Dorothy walking into Oz. It was quite an amazing place. And the chandeliers, the grand piano, and the throne. The throne was right there, and he sat me on the throne. My father said, "Hey, Doc, play him a little something." And he played for me. So I never forgot it. So when I got older, started hearing the stories, asking about the stories, and when I got a little older than that, and I thought I wanted to do this as a film, started tape recording my father, telling me all the stories, and then he said, "All right, we got to talk to Dr. Shirley." So I spoke to him as well, and I put it all together. And Dr. Shirley said, "I don't want you to make this film. I want you to put in everything that I've told you and your father has told you, but I want you to wait till I'm gone, whenever that may be." So I respected his wishes. So it took a while. Thank God he lived a long, healthy life. But a couple of years ago, around 215, I decided to really do it. And I thought, my whole life I was going to do it myself. I said, well, maybe I shouldn't just do it myself. Maybe I should bring in another writer in for another. So it's not just me, in my vision. So I brought in a friend, Brian Curry, who brought it to Pete. And then Pete wanted to meet me. And, I was kind of stubborn about it. I said, this is something I got to do. But the second I met Pete, we discussed it. I knew, like my dad was kicking me in the head, saying, let Pete run with this. And,
I love that.
We did.
What kind of spoke to you about this particular story? Because it is a bit of a departure from the comedies you've made.
Yeah, it wasn't trying to make a departure, which I should have been trying to do, by the way. I always say this. I look at like Rob Reiner's career, and he started with Spinal Tap, then he did A Sure Thing, then he did Stand By Me, and then A Few Good Men. And within 4 movies, he kind of showed he could do everything. And we didn't. And part of it was that we write our own material, and we were, in the comedy thing, we kind of got stuck there. But when I heard this story, the thing that got me was, Brian Hayes Curry told me the story. He says, black concert pianist, 1962, Don Shirley. He he was going through the South. He was nervous about going, so he hired the toughest bouncer in New York City, Italian guy named Tony Lip, 6th grade education, but really didn't pay attention after 3rd grade. and Tony Lip was racist himself, and yet somehow at the end of this journey, they became lifelong friends. That's what got me.
Yes.
I think if they had just gone on this trip and been ended as enemies, I don't think I would have done it. I just didn't see the point. But I was so interested, like how they overcame this huge, valley, this hurdle, and that's what drew me in.
Viggo, I'm just curious to know, when you agreed to sign on, what's like the first step? Is it finding a donut store, or is it asking for the audio footage? Like, what had to come first for you to become Tony?
Pizza.
Actually, the first thing when I hung up, it took a little doing. I mean, on Pete's part, I was very cowardly about it, really. And when he said, I'm sending you this story. It's a departure for me. Please read it. If you don't like it, that's fine, But please read this, and if you want to talk about it, here's my number or whatever, right? And so I read the script. Starts out great. It gets better. I'm like, wow, when's this going to fall apart? And yes, it is a departure. And, and there's so much. And I finished the script, and I thought, wow, this is not only one of the best original screenplays I've read this year, but in a long, long time. I just thought, the writing made the writing look easy, if that makes sense. In other words, there's so much going, it's funny, it's very moving, it's based on real people, there's a history lesson, a civics lesson, it's profound. it gets better. It goes up and it goes out, and there's layers and layers and sparkling dialogue, and the characters are well drawn. It's just like, I finished, I thought, wow, this is amazing. And the only thing is, I'm reading, he's an Italian-American guy. He's a real person that existed. And I'm like, yeah, well. So I called Pete and I said, I can't even find the words to say how much I like the script, but I think you're already taking a swerve and doing something new, doing a drama, and why don't you cast an Italian-American actor? There's a lot of good ones out there. Now you're really asking for trouble, you know. And he was like, no. He had no doubts in his mind, but I had a lot of doubts in my mind. I said, well, can I sleep on it? Let me read it one more time. I promise to call tomorrow. So I bit the bullet and said, okay, I'm going to have faith in you and not be such a, coward, really, and do it. But then I hung up the phone. And then I went to the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror, I said, you're an idiot. Now you have to do this, But that's a common thing for actors, I think. But when it's more, it feels like more of a stretch. But I immediately relied on Nick Vallelonga, who was helpful to Linda and to me, immensely. Opened up his arms, opened the door to his house and to his family and his uncles, and unbeknownst to Pete, many of them were being cast. And maybe you can tell the story, because there's a lot of non-actors in that family. What Pete said to me, one of the things he said to me in casting me, he said, I don't want to have faces that you recognize from other Italian-American family movies or stories. I want to do something different. In principle, it's a great idea, but it's very risky. Unless you really know what you're going to do, unless you have a good game plan and you're as calm as he is under fire, it's risky, but it worked great. It's unbelievable. Anyway, without the Vallelonga family, there's no way I could have done what I did just in preparing the character, and my intention always, like any actor, I think, is you don't want to do a caricature of anybody.
What were you most excited to kind of bring out in this character?
Oh, there was so much that was exciting about it for me. The idea that it was a true story. The script was fantastic, like Viggo said, and aside from all of that and the meaning that it seemed to hold, Viggo and Mahershala, I knew they were already cast. Oh. I knew Pete's work, and I thought there's a sense of humor in here, and if you're not funny, that can be totally missed. And I think that's a great strength that Pete has, that other directors, you can't just discover that about yourself. You either have a sense of humor or you don't, and I think, Pete can do it broad, but he can also do it small, and I think that's what truly funny people can bring out, is the humanity in each character, and they become more than just something on a page. Right. And I think, Viggo is hilarious. The humor was such a wonderful and surprising and beautiful thing that actually lends itself to creating more of a powerful story, I think. So that was exciting to me, but, I auditioned for this role, and I got called up, and I was working on something else, and I was working, terrible hours. You work long hours, and I had done a 12 or 14-hour day. I had no clothes with me for an audition, but I thought, well, I'm just going to go. I borrowed clothes from wardrobe, but it was a 70s period piece, so I had like bell bottoms and a shirt. I tried to tuck it. I tried to do something. And I showed up, and they said, they just want to hear you read it. And when I got there, Viggo was sitting at a table with props. And I thought, oh, God. I just looked at this a few times. I thought maybe I was just going to warm up or something. And before I knew it, we were sitting there acting at the table I was serving him spaghetti. We were pretending to eat it. We were doing all of these things. And I stayed in there. You guys waited for me late at night. I stayed in there for a long time. And then as I left, I thought, you know what? I feel like I could have done more. I get a phone call. Come back in on a Saturday morning. So I come in on a Saturday morning, and we go, and we're sitting there just kind of going over things. We start improvising. We start doing these things, because I come from a big family, so some of that stuff seems so natural to me. And then after that audition, I was thinking, oh, God, what just happened in there? Did I just
You were great, and the first time you did it on the first day, Pete was just playing with your mind.
How does it change the game as a composer when your subject of the film is a musician?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I had never heard of Dr. Shirley before this film, and it was such an incredible gift to not only discover the music, but then have to start to investigate it and learn it and all of that, and basically, when we were looking at trying to do going to the score, Pete and I talked about trying to differentiate the sound between Dr. Shirley's music that we had pre-recorded to sound like his trio with piano, bass, and cello, and the sound of the score. So we decided to go with an orchestra for the sound. But in order to figure out, like you said, some sort of continuity between it all, I just started looking at all of Dr. Shirley's actual influences. He was really influenced, obviously, by just the entire classical and jazz canon, but in addition to that, a lot of Negro spirituals, a lot of early gospel music, and he fused it in a way that I had never heard before when I first heard his music. So then I started to look at, again, Dr. Shirley's music and look at a bunch of folk melodies and Negro spiritual melodies and gospel music, and I started to write all of my themes for the score at the piano as if they were going to be just like a gospel song or a folk melody or a Negro spiritual. And basically we just play it over and over again and keep tinkering with it until I could play it and feel like it sounded like that. And then I went and orchestrated it all to have a bit more of the influence of Ravel or Debussy or Gershwin, the other influences of Dr. Shirley. And so that's kind of what we did to try to, again, have some sort of cohesion between the two things, but still have them sound completely different.
But Mahershala, I'm a piano player, so I always pay very close attention to actors playing the piano. You are exceptional at the finger work and everything. It is so realistic. I know your character on Luke Cage also plays piano, so maybe you've worked on this
There's a
before.
big difference in how Luke Cage plays piano on this character.
Right.
Kris and I worked for a few months coming into this, and Kris does the fingering. It's a composite, but the main thing in coming into it that I wanted to do with Kris, and when Pete first approached me about working on this film, that was just like Viggo talks about. I don't know if he shared this with you today about his concern about playing an Italian American.
Yeah, I whined about it for quite a while.
I'm not a musician. I'm an actor. I got to act like I'm a musician, you know? And but I trained to pretend well, you know? And Kris helped me. Kris helped me quite a bit with that. And so the focus for me was, one, I don't want to be a distraction to the audience and do a disservice to Dr. Shirley or musicians in general. And two, I need to know where I'm at in the story. I'm not playing. Where I'm at is not the same place each time I'm sitting down at that piano. Mm-hmm. So as an actor, it's not about just plug in the next musical song. Like, where am I at? I came from a place as I rushed on. I got a story coming into this space, right? So we've done 20 Q&As. You're in a different space every time you walk in a Q&A, right? From what you brought in this space as you come to sit down in this chair. So every time you sit down at that piano, where are we in the story, you know? And so that's where my focus was, you know, and all the other stuff, everything we did to make sure that that's believable, and me practicing the piano and practicing with Kris and making sure the hands and arms are in the right place. That stuff is kind of technical, you know, but it's more about what was going on in the interior for me. So,
you know what? You guys made beautiful music together, and I'm just so glad you all were able to be here to tell us about it.